Let's move on to all the news that was happening today. We're going to start off with this New York Post story that was released containing this letter that was obtained by the New York Post from Janel Grant to Vince McMahon, dated December 24th of 2021. This is a several-page love letter written by Janel Grant to Vince McMahon on Christmas Eve. And Ann Callis, who is the lawyer for Janel Grant, put out a statement. People can read the letter on the New York Post site. But Ann Callis stated, frankly, it's pretty disgusting that Vince's weeks late attempt to defend his horrendous behavior he claims to this day never happened, is to try to showcase letters that Vince himself coerced her to write. His psychological torture of her continues, as is typical of abusive predators who respond to women speaking out with increased threats. While Janel isn't a stranger to his intimidation tactics, this is a new low even for him. And the article also gave us some new information, one of which is that Vince McMahon is being represented by Jessica Taub Rosenberg of Katzowitz Benson Torres, which is the law firm that just recently settled its case with WWE while representing MLW, which is interesting. And Rosenberg gave her own response to the accusation of McMahon coercing Janel Grant to write this letter. Rosenberg stated, quote, "This is revisionist history. No one coerced Ms. Grant to write that letter. She wrote it of her own accord. The fact that the letter shows it was the 24th draft speaks volumes. Nowhere in her voluminous complaint that is replete with fabrications does she mention being coerced into such behavior. The language of the letter is consistent with other communications she made to Mr. McMahon over the course of their consensual relationship." And it also added some context within the article about Grant through one of her representatives, sharing information that Grant had to go through surgery on one of her fingers earlier that week. And a text exchange was shown between McMahon and Grant where this letter is brought up, where her concern is, how will I write your letter? I can type and read it or try to write it in a couple of days. I'm so sorry if I messed this up. I want you to have a nice letter. And then there are all these excerpts from the love letter that are essentially have been lifted from articles, stories, poems, other forms of pop culture. And I mean, there is a lot of different ways that I guess you can read this. Wade, did you have, like, what were your thoughts just reading the article itself? I mean, what came to mind here? And let's also keep it that this is a strategy on behalf of Vince McMahon and his defense team. Would you say this was an effective strategy for whatever they were aiming to do? And this was clearly coming from Vince McMahon's side.
Right. Was it effective? That's really hard to say. I think if you were somebody who needed any shred of evidence in order to lean towards a sort of believing of Vince McMahon, this might have provided something like that for you. You know, look no further than the comment section of this New York Post article itself. But that in no way, I think, is indicative of what everybody feels reading something like this. Certainly, depending on what platform you go to, many people have already made up their minds against Vince McMahon, and something like this isn't going to be enough to sway them the other way. I don't personally think this changes, in my opinion, one way or another. I think coercion is a very possible scenario in all of this. It's possible she genuinely meant those things at the time, but whether or not like those things are true, the allegations still, I think, stand very much on their own. You, even if you're in love with somebody, you could still get raped by that person. You know, all of these things I think are still very possible. So I don't really think, to me, this changes a whole lot.
Yeah, I mean, I look at this and yeah, it's like certainly it checks out the fact that a number of these excerpts have been lifted from other places, and you can read into that whatever you want.
Well, what does that mean? Like, their defense is that because she was coerced and had to make so many drafts of this, she basically had no passion for it, and therefore stole lines from old films and the GQ article.
I don't think you can read either way on that. I mean, it's there. You can certainly it does read into that.
It doesn't prove anything, though.
The fact that this was the 24th draft of this letter, and Vince McMahon's lawyer is using that as evidence of this woman's undying love for Vince McMahon. Like I can tell you that of the letters I have written to my wife, I don't think I have ever done a second draft of a letter. Do any come to mind for you, Wei? I mean, in the times that when you wrote your wedding vows, how many drafts did you go through? Did you hit 20?
No, I did not. I mean, I don't think I even counted the drafts. I mean, certainly you might type a sentence, delete a sentence, and then do it again. But like, I wouldn't officially number any drafts, nor does that mean anything, even if she did, John. Like, this could be a scenario where, like, hey, like, what do you want for your birthday, Vince? I don't want anything. I don't know, write me a letter. And then maybe she's taking it very seriously, and then in her own way decided to like just starting over. Maybe she could, because I'm just speculating. That's all we can do with information. Like
I'm not even asking for any like hard evidence here of like anything, because this is not. I don't think that this shows anything, but I think their idea was to show this, and this was suddenly going to bring all this support for Vince McMahon. And to me, it's like, I think it only
That's what a lawyer does. They take whatever evidence there is and they exaggerate and they amplify towards their side.
I think if first of all, like, I don't think there's too many people rushing to Vince McMahon's defense, period, in all of this.
Oh, you'd be surprised reading some of the comments of this.
Well, that's why I don't read comments. Article. But I would say for like, if you have read this complaint, and like, this to me paint something of like coercion. Now it's not to me going to lessen any of those beliefs that people had prior to this. It's also worth noting in the fact that it stated in the New York Post that this was taken from Grant's laptop as part of an investigation on behalf of WWE's board by white shoe law firm Simpson, Thatcher, and Bartlett, and is expected to appear in court filings as the case progresses, according to sources close to the situation. And I guess the other question you would have in this, was this a solo exercise by Vince McMahon? Was WWE, are they in any type of coordination with Vince McMahon in this legal defense? They are defendants in this case, as is John Laurinaitis. We know John Laurinaitis is being represented by Edward Brennan. We now know who Vince McMahon is being represented by. And with WWE,
how interesting is all that? The fact that like these people who were suing you are suddenly now the people that you're working with. What do you think about
I think it's really interesting. The law firm, like, I'm not saying it necessarily creates any conflict, but it's just interesting that here is this Kasowitz group, like, they are a main, like, that's why it caught so many people's attention when MLW was working with such a high profile law firm. But yeah, like, you are talking literally on the heels of a $20 million settlement that this law firm secured from WWE, and now they are representing Vince McMahon. And I would make an educated guess that they are not representing WWE after just procuring $20 million from them. So it would tell you that Vince McMahon likely has separate defense attorneys lined up apart from WWE and apart from John Laurinaitis.
Sure. Yes.
So anyway, we're going to talk about this more on Wednesday's Pollock and Thurston. We may be having a guest joining us on Wednesday to talk further about this, but you can tune in Wednesday at 3 Eastern. It's the same time this week for myself and Brandon Thurston.